Welcome to the UC Santa Barbara Office of Admissions tutorial for freshman applicants. Today, we're focusing on the personal insight questions, also known as the PIQs. Let's get started. The University of California, the 9 undergraduate campuses, share one singular UC application. The University of California application is available to students August 1st, the year prior to their enrollment. Students are able to submit that one singular application in November, between November 1st and November 30th. You can choose to apply to multiple UC campuses with that one submission, and each campus receives the exact same application, which means they receive the exact same PIQs. Now, the UC application has 7 sections where we ask for information about your academics, your intended major. We ask about what you've done inside and outside of the classroom. The application has over 100 questions, and the admissions officer reviewing your application will look at this information when it's available to them. Due to state law and UC admissions policy, you'll find that we cannot use race, gender, ethnicity, or legacy in our evaluation process. In fact, the University of California admissions officer cannot email you, contact you, or search anything online about you. Instead, only the self-reported information into the application that you enter is viewed by the admissions officer. While some questions have simple answers, hey, what grade did you earn in your English class freshman year? I can see that and I know it. Others might need more context. For example, what was your first language spoken? Maybe you chose French, Italian, or something other than English. I never ask, when did you learn your second language? So context lets the admissions officer get to know you better. That's why we ask students to fill out what are known as personal insight questions. Now, the admissions office will do a holistic or a comprehensive review. And there are 13 factors which faculty across the 9 UC campuses have created so that the Office of Admissions on each UC campus can select students that are qualified for admission. Many of these factors are what you expect, right? They're the completion of a set coursework, which we call our A through G classes. It's the ability to showcase advanced work or honors work. It's the ability for you to tell us what your senior year coursework looks like. There are also factors about your leadership, your special talent, accomplishments in light of life experiences. In other words, context matters in both your academic and your personal review. So that's why the personal insight questions are oftentimes really important to the freshman admissions process. Context can be shared in depth in the personal insight questions. So here's what you need to know. There are 8 questions. You only have to answer 4 of them. So you want to pick the 4 that will showcase you and your accomplishments the best. Options given to you make it easier to relate to 1 or more questions. So really don't feel like you have to answer all 8. Find the 4 that really allow us, the strangers in the admissions office, to get to know you. All 8 questions have equal value, so pick the 4 that are right for you and don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Within the application process, there are 350 words max per response. So this is meant to be a short answer to a question, not an essay. Oftentimes, we talk about this as your interview with the Office of Admissions. It should be personal. That's why it's called the personal insight questions, which means you do need to talk about yourself using I, my, or me statements. We want to know more about you. And because we don't allow for letters of recommendation, again, we don't have interviews in our general process. This is the place for us to understand your context. Now, the UC application will showcase the 8 questions, numbering them 1 through 8. They are numbered, not ranked. We do not think of one question as more valuable than the other. The questions were created by the directors of admission across the UC campuses. Each question ties back to one or more of those 13 admissions factors that we talked about earlier. When you click on the answer button, what will happen is the application will take you to a page where the question is at the top of the screen. In the admissions office, the question is also visible to us. That means you don't have to repeat the question in your answer. We know that space is very valuable when your word limit is 350. There is an open text box that will allow you to then cut and paste a response that you've created elsewhere into the application. We hope that you don't use the open text box as a place to type in your answer, because the University of California application has a 20-minute timer. And if you're in the application typing away for more than 20 minutes and you haven't pushed the blue button that says save and continue, you will be logged out and your work will not be saved. So you want to work offline, work on your spell check, your grammar check, but be aware that the Office of Admissions is not looking at grammar. It's not looking at structure. We don't care about the font size. We don't care about the type. Instead, we are looking at the answer itself. All right, let's follow along as we work through the 8 personal insight questions. If you want to Google UC PIQ on any search engine, you can. Otherwise, click on the or scan the QR code to download the UC Personal Insight Question Worksheet available on the Office of Admissions page for the University of California. The questions themselves, what are they? The 8 questions are diverse. We start off with question number 1, again, numbered but not ranked, that asks about leadership experience, that what you've had and how it's positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. Question 2 asks about your creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways. We hope that you'll define it for us. Could it be problem solving, original and innovative thinking, or artistically? Those are just to name a few. We want you to describe how you express your creative side. For question 3, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? Again, you're defining this for us. How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? Question 4 is asking you to describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or work to overcome an educational barrier that you might have faced. Question 5, describe the most significant challenge that you've faced and the steps you've taken to overcome it. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? Reflect back to your transcript or back to the 4 years of high school. What was the impact that challenge had on you as a student? Question 6, think about the academic subject that inspires you and describe how you further this inside and or outside of the classroom. Question 7, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? Question 8, beyond what's already been shared in the application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admission to the University of California? Now, I'll point out that the University of California Admissions Office does not compare students to one another. You're not lined up and we don't say student A or B, who do we want? That doesn't happen across any of the UC campuses. So this question is not about comparing yourself to anyone. It's more, hey, what did we not ask you? The important thing is once you've read the question, you need to understand what are we asking. So let's learn how to break down a question. Let's use question number 4 as an example. So read it to yourself one more time and put that focus on what you think is the most important part of your question. So describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or work to overcome an educational barrier. Okay, so first part of your answer, briefly describe the opportunity and or barrier. The conversation here is, what is the definition to you? While one student can think of an opportunity as being able to do a running start program or dual enrollment, they're taking college classes as a high school student, someone else might not have had that chance. And for them, instead, making it to, English in their senior year when they started off as ESL, that's the opportunity, that's the accomplishment. So recognize that the Office of Admissions reader is going to be looking at you to briefly describe this. I'll throw out the word briefly because we don't actually need you to go into depth and detail about, hey, your English class or your math class or registering for that dual enrollment course. Instead, we want to understand the opportunity or barrier because the second part of your answer is going to be the meat of your response. And that is, why is this important to us? It's the so what factor. Who are you today because of this opportunity and challenge? Reflect on yourself. I know it's hard to do, to really turn that mirror inside and to think about yourself. Also, don't get stuck on traditional ideas of barriers and opportunities. This really is upon you, the student, to tell me, the admissions officer, what your life is like. While some of us are in our 20s in the Office of Admissions, others are in their 60s. So barriers and opportunities from high school are really different. And we don't put any of our own bias into the review process. Instead, we're focusing on just the answer that you give us. So recognize that we can't assume anything about you and we will not look anything up. So it's your job to showcase, again, the so what factor, why it's relevant, why it's important, and how it's shaped you as an individual. All right, so you saw the question being broken down. You understand the two parts of your answer. Let's do this again, but maybe with question number 1 about leadership. Again, read the question out loud. Describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So the first part of the question, as you're breaking this down, is, have you had a leadership experience? And if the answer is yes, and you want to talk about it, this could be your question. Now, we're not asking you if you have a leadership role or if you have a leadership title. Instead, we want to know what that experience was. Did you step up during your math team Olympiad competition and you took the role of captain even though it wasn't actually assigned to you? Are you that lead volunteer at the soup kitchen, or that person who just everybody goes to because you have the answers, you've been there the longest, right? Are you in your family the person that sort of picks up the problems and sort of finds answers? Are you that person who's at Bible study working to make sure that there's more individuals participating? We actually ask this leadership question with a goal that you'll reflect not just in the classroom, but also in your life experiences. And we want you to, 1, think about why that experience was important to you and what it's done to make you who you are today. You're going to see that that's the second part of every answer that I'm going to point at you. It's not just about that leadership experience or that opportunity that you've had, but it's also why it's important to you. So that so what factor. It could be that because of this experience, you have had the option to. So that's a great starting point on a sentence if you're stuck. Because of blank, I have blank. Think of it that way. Make sure that if you're giving examples, they tie back to you in the recent past. We don't necessarily need you to go back into childhood of, kindergarten or elementary school. But if that is where you started an experience, then make sure that your examples reflect to more recent events as well. All right, I know that that is a pretty easy way to navigate through some of these questions. And I know that oftentimes there's an opportunity to see these questions going, I think I've got it. So let me reflect on maybe question number 3 really quickly. What would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? If you're breaking down this question, what's the first thing that you need to answer? That's right, the definition of your talent or your skill. We want to know in the Office of Admissions what that is. And then the second part of the question is really right there. How have you used that skill or talent? And not just how have you used it, but what is it that it makes you unique because of it? Why is it important to you that you can juggle, that you're a writer, that you're a mathematician? Why is that talent for you playing an instrument, or the talent is that you're able to get up and do a speech competition in front of 500 people? We really respect when we understand the context behind your skill or talent. Be aware that the Office of Admissions, I'll remind you, the Office of Admissions has access to your whole application. So if your talent or skill is related to an extracurricular activity or a class, and it's already being listed in the application, don't repeat yourself. Instead, enhance the knowledge that the stranger reading your application has. Now, I want to make sure that I'm not going through every single question. So let's skip to number 7. Let's look at question number 7 and ask ourselves, hey, what have I done to make my school or community a better place? Because that's the question being asked in the PIQ number 7. First part of your answer when you're breaking this down, well, it's a little different from the other questions because I want you to reflect, hey, you saw that there was a problem in your school or your community, and that spurred you to take action. So what did you see that needed improvement? Briefly describe that. And then, hey, think about what's your definition of community or school? This is a reflective question for yourself. Your school could be your English class. It could be your sports team. It could be your actual family unit, mom, dad, grandpa, or it could be your church group, your temple. Note that we, again, don't have definitions preset for you. You get to make these definitions for us. So when you're answering the question, you want to make sure that you tell us what you saw that needed improvement, what you did, and then the big and important, so what factor? Why is this relevant to who you are today? Now, as someone who's read Office of Admissions PIQs for many, many years, this is often the question where students will reflect on big tasks. Hey, we brought together new uniforms for the volleyball team. We fundraised over $3,000. And that we statement is great if it were a group application, but it's not. It's a singular person applying for admission. Therefore, what part of the we were you, the applicant? Again, it's great that you're being honest and it wasn't done by yourself, but you need to reflect upon your own task within any group setting. So if you did something in a group, maybe you're a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout and you were talking about your Gold Star or your Eagle Scout ranking, and it wasn't done by yourself, you still need to be selfish and talk about what specifically you did. All right, folks, last question, and we sort of broke this down, and that was question number 8. Beyond what's already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admission? Again, the University of California will never read your personal insight question by itself, and we do not compare students to one another. So after reviewing your whole UC application, was there something that we did not ask? Is there something that the Office of Admissions needs to know about you? I'll make note, the Office of Admissions is here to review your application. We are not a reporting agent to ICE. So if you are talking about your undocumented status, we are not here to judge if you are talking about a political belief. We are not here to make a judgment on, are you a good or bad person? We're here to understand, what have you accomplished? So students oftentimes have a moment of, should I share this? Should I talk about a learning disability? Should I talk about my sexual orientation? Should I talk about this or that has defined who I am? And the answer is always going to be yes, if it gives us a clearer picture of your accomplishments, with the knowledge that if a reader reads your application and says, I can't relate to this, the Office of Admissions officer can say, hey, I'm biased. I shouldn't be reading this application. Let me pass it to someone else who doesn't put their own feelings and their own thoughts into us. So please feel like in the application, in this personal insight question number 8, we're essentially asking, what new information do we need to know about you? What did we not ask? And hey, let's look and reflect at your life, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, so that we can find relevant information about who you are and what you've done. Okay, guys, let's throw some tasks at you. So getting started, you're going to want to read all 8 questions out loud to yourself, crossing out the questions that you don't want to answer, that you don't have anything to say about, or you just don't understand. Look at the remaining questions, and remember, you're not just answering the question, but also saying, hey, why is this important to me? And can I explain who I am today because of it? Start typing your answer without worrying about the word count, because after you've finished your response, then you're going to go back and edit, thinking about, hey, I don't care about structure in the admissions office. So the Office of Admissions doesn't need me to have an introduction and a conclusion. That's wasted space. I can cut that out. Hey, I also want to make sure that I, as the reader, am sharing, or sorry, I, as the writer, am sharing my personal history and I'm being relevant to who I am today. And then finally, once you felt, okay, I've got a draft that's really almost done, I want you to share it with a friend or family member who will read it out loud and then possibly find the gaps. Hey, you didn't talk about this or that, or hey, I don't understand that or the other. Recognizing that the Office of Admissions cannot give you credit for quotes because they're someone else's words. We won't give you credit for titles because it's not an essay and you don't need to worry about restating the question. We have a ability to read your application in a short period of time. So creative writing is often subjective. Therefore, we encourage you not to worry about that as your focal point. We also need you to remember that the applicant reader is looking at facts and trying to get to know you. So if you're trying to put storytelling or scene setting, in other words, trying to put the admissions officer in the moment with you, that's not necessary. Instead, be brief, be accurate, and be selfish. That's the best part of answering your question. For many students, they forget that it's holistic admissions. The application really doesn't need to say the same things 5 times. So if you told me that you're part of the volleyball team in your extracurricular activities or your resume, then you don't have to repeat it in a personal insight question. But if you didn't elaborate on how you got cut from the team 3 times, but your persistence let you stay, you ended up being team manager, and now you're looking at, thinking of going into, a sports entrepreneurship management role because of that, that's more detail. That's a personal insight question. Remember that we don't look anything up. So if you're making reference to things like, hey, I'm a distinguished Don, or I'm, an accomplished, happy pirate, is that your mascot? What's going on? I don't know, and I won't look it up. Clearly state that it's you, your personal insight question, by using I statements versus we, they, us. So in the application, if you're looking, there are these 2 sections called additional comments. I'll point out that one of them is in the personal insight question tab. And this is a place for any additional information that you need to share with the admissions office. This is where you want to put those random facts that set more context, that give more clarity, that expand on details about who you are. This is where they belong. Don't try to stuff them into your personal insight question response because you want to make sure that the admissions officer knows, hey, my school limits advanced placement to my senior year. That's an additional comment, not a fact that you're adding to your leadership response. Within the application process, we do not have a COVID-19 question. Be aware that if you're talking about a life experience like a fire, an evacuation, COVID-19, or anything that's that big global feeling, it's not about what that global feeling was. It's not about educating me on fire safety. It's not about understanding what was the pandemic. It's about you in that role. And if you're confused about anything we've stated, again, the UC PIQ search on any web browser will take you to admissions.University of California. It will take you to the personal insight question section where those worksheets exist, as well as those questions are listed. And I want to point out that we're excited that at UCSB, our UCSB for Me playlist includes updated opportunities for you to learn about the 7 sections of the UC application, an update on the application in certain areas like undocumented students and understanding how to fill out the application, out-of-state students and seeing where to enter your coursework, and so much more. So between now and then, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to ask. Our goal is to make sure that you find those answers. On behalf of the Office of Admissions, I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in one of our live workshops. Otherwise, best of luck on your UC application.